Hi, hello. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar. It's a joy to welcome you all. Good morning, good evening, good time of the day, wherever you are joining from. Hi. Welcome. We will give a couple of minutes for everyone to join before we officially start this webinar. But feel free to use our chat to say hello and let us know where you're joining from. I already see some people. Hi from Indonesia, hi from the Netherlands, Cambodia, Philippines, Vietnam, New York. Great. My colleague is in New York. So anybody else in New York, let us know. Vietnam, Bali, Philippines. Great. Excellent, everybody. Just feel free to say hello for those of you who just joined. We will begin our webinar in a minute or so, just making sure everybody's settled in, making sure that everybody can hear me okay and can see the slides, can see me and my colleague Jill, who is here to support us with the questions. Hello from Malaysia, Myanmar, Indonesia. Wonderful. Hello and welcome. Good evening in the Philippines. I know it's late for you all, but thank you for taking some time out of your busy schedule to learn together about successful YSEALI Seeds application. Today, we will dive in deeper into looking into the elements of your application, your proposal. We will look specifically into YSEALI Seeds theme and budget and how to prepare it in the best way to be competitive enough with the rest of the applications for this incredible program. Hello and welcome everybody. We have 175 people today joining us, so we'll give another moment or so. And just for the purpose of this recording and for our presentation, you will notice that we have auto-generated captions on the screen. Just wanted to apologize in advance if some of the words are not being recorded correctly. My apologies, this is auto-generated. I hope we will live in a world where artificial intelligence is able to support us in the most quality way with auto-generated captions in the future. But at least this is a good way for us to add an additional accessibility element to be able to enjoy this presentation and learn from it no matter where you come from, okay? All right, well, welcome. We are almost at 200 people today. Thank you so much for joining. We are delighted to have you. My name is Natalia Eden, and I have my colleague Jill Dale, who are, and we both are working on this incredible program, Young Southeast Asian Leaders Initiative Seeds for the Future Small Grants Competition Program. That's the full name. I will be using abbreviation YSEALI. It's YSEALI. So today we are meeting to talk specifically about crafting your, focusing on YSEALI themes and your budget, as well as other elements of your proposal and your overall presentation. Just a reminder, there is a chat going on here, so please feel free to say hi. We'd love to see where people are joining from. At the same time, you will see on the bottom of your screen a little icon for Q&A, which is question answer. This is where you can post any questions you have throughout the entire presentation. At the end of this presentation, Jill and I will be answering these questions. Well, Jill will be answering throughout the whole presentation, and I will grab some of those questions at the end to make sure that your questions are answered in the end. Okay, so thank you very much, and let's begin, everyone. All right. If you are new and you just joined for this presentation for the first time, we did have our first webinar last week, and I will show where to look for the recording of that webinar. Our first webinar was more general, but just to remind everybody and to be on the same page, Young Southeast Asian Leaders Initiative Seeds for the Future is a small grants competition, and it provides funding for the region's most promising young leaders to carry projects to improve their communities, their countries, and the region. Usually you can compete for up to $15,000 to create a project and run that project for 9 months period. More details on that later. This year, we are excited to announce 4 core YSEALI themes. Those are civic engagement, economic empowerment, and social entrepreneurship, education, and environmental issues. So those are the 4 themes that you can look into when you are creating your proposal for YSEALI Seeds grant competition, okay? We will also take a look at each theme separately and look into examples from the past projects who have applied for one of the themes or maybe a few themes at the same time. As I mentioned, for those of you who might have missed first webinar, you can still watch it on Cultural Vistas YouTube channel, and you see the shortened link on the screen right now. At the same time, you can just Google Cultural Vistas YouTube and then look at the 2022 Young Southeast Asian Leaders Initiative Seeds for the Future playlist. And this is where we will be adding each webinar recording into that playlist. So you can always go back and rewatch it, especially if you need some segments of this webinar to look over with your team again. Today is our second webinar in the series. And next week is our final webinar number 3. This is the most exciting webinar, in my opinion. This is where we will be inviting our 3 amazing YSEALI Seeds projects from this current cohort to share about their experience of competing for YSEALI Seeds grant and then implementing the grant as well. So tune in for that, especially if you have questions to those amazing leaders, and you can receive some advice firsthand from them next week, okay? So same time next week, tune in. Reminder for everybody, our application deadline is November 11. So please don't wait until the very last day, just because anything might happen. Sometimes systems get overloaded with so many applications being submitted basically a few hours before the deadline. So I would highly recommend and encourage you to submit your application in advance, at least a day or 2 before the deadline. You don't want to be stressed out. So we don't want you to be stressed out. We want you to have a great chance at being selected. So please make sure that you apply in time. All right. Let's see. So overall brief overview, just for your own planning purposes. The projects will be selected and the selected teams will be notified sometime between January and February 2022. And then typically we do have our in-person kickoff workshop in Southeast Asia in February, March 2022. Depending on the safety situation, we might do it virtually this year again. But this is also for you to know and plan your involvement. That one is mandatory for all projects to participate in, because we usually give essential information about your project implementation. Next, right after the kickoff workshop, the project implementation period starts. That's where you get to work and you try to make your projects come true, right? So this is where most of your work will be happening between March and December 2022. And then typically you wrap up or you finish your project before January 2023. So that's when you will be submitting your final report. So keep that in mind, that when you submit your proposal, it needs to be feasible and it needs to be accomplished within the 9-month period, although you can have some sustainability plans in the future, and tell us how you want to grow that project after you officially completed your YSEALI Seeds commitment. That's always preferred for us to see you be successful and grow with your project. All right, some of the reminders for application requirements. Again, first and foremost, it's the citizenship that we will be checking. So your team, your core team members, the 3 team members who will talk about it today, the project leader, secretary, and Treasurer, they must hold a citizenship of one of those 11 countries that you see on the screen. And I will also name them. So Brunei, Cambodia, Indonesia, Laos, Malaysia, Myanmar, Philippines, Singapore, Thailand, Vietnam, and Timor-Leste. Now, your additional team members who are not core 3 team members, any other volunteers or consultants or speakers, they could be from other countries too if they want to join, but we need to know that the project is run by eligible leaders from YSEALI countries. Okay, all participants must be between 18 and 35 years old. I've mentioned on that last webinar as well. If you're younger than 18, YSEALI's motto is never too young to lead, and we stand by that. We want you though to have experience and be able to show that you are able to run the project and the amount of funding that you receive. So if you are younger than 18, we recommend you to join one of the projects as a support team member, gain that experience, and then apply with your own team a little bit later. So we want you to be prepared with the level of responsibility, financial and otherwise, that you will get. So similarly, with those of you who are older than 35, we do not say no to you, do not participate. You can definitely serve as mentors. You can serve as supporters and volunteers with any other project. Join them and help them grow with all of your experience that you can share with them. So again, you must address one of the 4 YSEALI themes: civic engagement, economic empowerment and social entrepreneurship, education, or environmental issues. Now, some of the projects will have one or more of these themes, and some might be focusing on just one. It's totally fine. It really depends on your project overall. So again, another requirement is to have at least 3 dedicated core team members: the project leader, secretary, and treasurer. They also must be YSEALI members, Young Southeast Asian Leaders Initiative members. So from one of the 10 ASEAN nations or Timor-Leste, okay? And then projects must be completed between March and December 2022. And I want to highlight that we understand that right now with COVID impact, it's very challenging to plan or anticipate something in the future. But almost 2 years later, after the COVID, changed the world, we understand that it's probably here to stay in some way, unfortunately, as much as we don't want it. So when you do plan your projects, make sure that you have a plan in mind on how you're going to run your project despite COVID realities that you might be facing in your communities. More on that later again as well. So if you are a previous YSEALI Seeds winner, meaning if you were a project leader, secretary, or treasurer on a previous YSEALI Seeds project that got selected, we invite you to participate as supporter or volunteer or consultant, and let an opportunity for other leaders to experience being in the core leadership team, okay? So please email us if you have additional questions about that. Okay, let's talk about the themes that we have this year. And I wanted to show some examples of projects that we've had in the past that pursued one of those themes, or sometimes a few themes at the same time. So civic engagement, a great project from last year, is Impact to Youth Timor-Leste. I'll show that project and tell you more. And then for economic empowerment and social entrepreneurship, project Pink Collar Community from Malaysia in 2019. For education, we had project Future Deaf Teachers from Vietnam, and environmental issues. An example is project Play Naturally from Brunei. Although there are so many more to bring examples, unfortunately, we don't have as much time today. So I'll focus only on those I mentioned. All right, so let me actually go back just a second. Okay, so civic engagement, a great example is our project from Timor-Leste last year, who worked together to organize youth in Timor-Leste around around building sustainable future through different pilot grants that they created. They created their own podcast or like a radio station. They also created a boot camp to support young leaders with equip them with skills in social innovation and development. They did a few wonderful projects where they organized these young citizens to care about their environment. So as you can see, they had some mangrove planting exercises or activities that they had. So this was a wonderful example and experience how a team on this project got together and decided, how do we equip young people around us to be active citizens, to be responsible leaders, and to use, how do we teach them the skills and equip them with those skills so then they can be effective in their community. So that was a beautiful example of civic engagement project, although they had other themes. Education, for example, was another theme. Now, Project Pink Collar Community from Malaysia in 2019, I always bring that example. So that was a project as an example of economic empowerment and social entrepreneurship. The premise of the project was to basically help fill the gap in the domestic worker sector in Malaysia, where they decided to empower the migrant worker community with skills and knowledge about their rights, about their leadership opportunities, at the same time working with future employers, and also training and teaching them and supporting them in understanding of how to work with migrant workers. And so this project is now a successful social enterprise where they not only create effective change, but they also a very successful, prominent entity that is we are very proud of ourselves as well. So another theme, to give an example, the theme of education, great example is project from 2020, Future Deaf Teachers from Vietnam, where a team of young leaders decided to help potential sign language teachers, equip them with knowledge of teaching methods and sign language, so then they potentially could become teachers themselves. And so this specific project had not only education as a theme, but also economic empowerment, just because their long-term goal was to support employment for the deaf community in Mekong Delta area. So not only teaching them the skills for teaching and the sign language itself, but also equipping them with employable opportunity or being employable in the future as well in the area, which is a wonderful example of how they were able to combine two themes into one. And finally, an example for environmental issues. So Play Naturally from Brunei from 2020. Again, they combine a few themes in one. I will focus on environmental issues here. So the team decided, how do we connect, the nature that we are preserving, the ASEAN heritage site of the Tasek Merembun Lake, and all of the legends and the myths and all of the beautiful cultural history that the elderly in the community still carry. How do we then get the youth excited about it so they care about their community, their environment, and preservation of the land? So they decided to do it in a very creative way. First, they were thinking about doing a theater production and write plays to then showcase it in the community's open air. COVID has changed the plans. Instead, they decided to create 3 short films, and teach young people about filmmaking, but also about environmental issues and preserving their community, their cultural identity, but also the beautiful environment in this ASEAN heritage site. So a beautiful way also to combine education theme and environmental issues theme into one. And thank you for all who are submitting their questions. Please keep them coming. Make sure that you put your questions in the Q&A, which is a button on the bottom of your screen. So the chat would be mostly to say hello, but then the Q&A is for us to track your questions, just so we don't lose them later on in the chat, and Jill is addressing some questions right now. You can also upvote some questions by clicking on the thumbs up if you have the same question, so we will know that that's the most pressing one for me to address at the end of this presentation. All right, let's carry on here. What it is that we are looking for when we select YSEALI Seeds projects, when we are reviewing all those hundreds wonderful ideas, proposals. Here it is. There is no much secret. It's really logical once you think about it. But the secret recipe here is to combine these specific attributes together, okay? So we're looking for a project to be scalable, sustainable, feasible, innovative, replicable, has measurable impact. Potentially, it could be train-the-trainer model. It could also have multi-country focus, but not necessary. And we are looking for future resource for next generation of young leaders or future engaged alumnus or alumna who would be supporting young Southeast Asian Leaders Initiative programming in the future. Let me see. So one of the things that I notice is missing the most out of these is measurable impact. Sometimes a team would get so excited about their innovative idea, they would write all about it in the proposal, but then they would forget to add, how would you know if that was a successful? How would you measure that? What is your anticipated impact, and how are you going to know that that impact was effective, right? So sometimes that piece is really missing, or sometimes I see that being added as one sentence in the end. So it's not really comparable to the amount of information you put in a proposal to the very little information about measurable impact. So don't overlook that. Another thing I would add here is feasible. That's something that we definitely need to understand, that you are capable of running a project, you are capable of being responsible for the funds, and you will spend the funds according to your approved budget, and that you understand how much money realistically you need to implement a specific scope of activities that you envision, okay? So there has to be a match there. Sometimes what I see in proposals is that you know, there's going to be like a small one activity, let's say a workshop, but then the amount of money that is requested for that activity is way more than that workshop could have been. So that's where feasibility is not quite accurate. It also could be reversed. Sometimes, you know, there's only small amount of money requested in the budget, but then the amount of activities, the amount of different events is so large that it's difficult to imagine how can you accomplish all of that with this much small budget, but also in the 9 months period of time. So it's good to be ambitious, but not overly ambitious, okay? So make sure that your project is feasible, meaning that it can be accomplished with the amount of money and the amount of time that you have, okay? So let's talk about sustainability briefly here. By sustainable, we mean the project that has a potential to live longer than just 9 months, right? Right now, if you are selected for YSEALI Seeds, you have the funds to build the platform for yourself, to gain the momentum. So then next year, let's say when you don't have YSEALI Seeds funding, you can still sustain your operations and find ways to cover your expenses or generate some revenue to sustain yourself. Now, during YSEALI Seeds period, obviously you cannot charge money from the community for any services you provide. That is not allowed under this program, but you can still build the way that you could potentially in the future turn it into a successful social enterprise, where you still bring the benefit to the community, but also find the way to sustain your operations, okay? Those are the most important ones. I will check the questions, and also we will touch on some more if you have questions about any other of those criteria that I just mentioned. We do have Q&A section at our website, YSEALiSeeds.org. If you scroll down, there are frequently asked questions section, and we try to cover some of the questions that are being asked from year to year. So check that one as well. All right, now let's focus on the segments of your YSEALI Seeds application, and we will talk about project team specifically. Now, it's very important for us to see who is your core team on the project, because it informs us how well are you equipped to run your project, how successful you will be with the experience and skill set that your team possess or has to offer to the project, right? At the same time, I want to mention that you don't have to be an expert in everything. We don't expect you to be. If, let's say, a certain aspect of your project requires a completely different set of skills, you can invite guest speakers or guest trainers to supplement or add additional skills that your core project team might not have, right? But this is not to say that your team shouldn't have some basic project management experience or skills just to help you be successful in your implementation, okay? So, or you've been a volunteer with some other projects or some other interesting activities, show us that, okay? I just want to ask you, please include relevant information on your resume, and please keep it short. Do not submit, 5-page long resume, okay? Make it easier for whoever is reviewing your application to get the most important pieces. Don't bury or cover those most relevant, important information about your team in a lengthy 5-page document. That is not helpful. What's helpful is for you to capitalize on the time and space you have to put most important relevant information up front for the reviewers to see, okay? So they don't have to, read and look and try to get something relevant from that resume. Make it easier, make it obvious to them that you are the best of the best, okay? With your specific skills for this specific project you're proposing. So when you're submitting your resumes, I would recommend to combine all 3 resumes into one document. It could be a PDF document or a Word document, but combine them together, all 3 members into one. Keep in mind that quality is always over quantity. So it doesn't have to be many pages as long as it's relevant. By relevant, an example I could also give sometimes, let's say you are already a mid-career professional, right? You've had some professional experience already, but instead you use your entire first page of your resume to describe your high school experience, right? Which is great. We all went to high school. We enjoyed that, I hope. And like I like to say, your family, your grandma would care a lot about what you did and what kind of achievements you had. But for the purpose of this project, we need to see your relevant, applicable experience to this project idea. So maybe put your relevant work experience up front, and don't waste that very valuable space in your resume for some of the achievements that might not be relevant for this specific purpose anymore, okay? Now, project leader, let's look at the project leader. It's really up to you how you divide responsibilities amongst the 3 of you. Based on our previous experiences, this is what we saw was a good model of the team responsibilities. So it's up to you to adapt that, or up to you to decide how you're going to divide it once you select it for the seeds for the future grant. So project leader typically is the head of implementation. That's somebody who communicates responsibilities to everybody. The project leader is in charge of overall making sure that the project is going to happen, okay? So they are making sure that whatever they promised in the proposal gets to become a reality and gets to be completed within 9 months period, okay? So that usually is a person who would lead the discussion with the team, manage the team, and manage or oversee overall project implementation, and communicate with the funder, with us, right? So we will be the funder in this case. So the project leader will be responsible for responding in time and being active in communicating the progress to us. Second team member, project secretary. Typically, project secretary would be somebody submitting regular reports. In our case, it would be either monthly reports or midterm and final reports, gathering that information from other team members if needed, and responsible for making sure that, all of the great things that your project does get to be known and get to be submitted to the funder, right? So the whole world knows how hard you worked and what an amazing impact you've created with your project. So that's very, very important. And sometimes I see that that is missing sometimes. If you're doing great work, but nobody knows about it and you don't highlight it in the report, we can't know about it, right? So it's almost like it didn't happen unless we search through social media. So it's important equally to do a great work that you do, but it's equally important to communicate your great work to the larger audiences and stakeholders, okay? So that's the person who will be also managing potentially your social media channels or your website and just in charge of generally communication. Obviously, this needs to be a very organized person. The last thing we want to see is that we need to chase after every team and remind them to submit their report, right? This has to be somebody who stays on top of things to show that you are a great, responsible leader. And the third team member is project treasurer. Typically, it is somebody who handles finances on behalf of your project. So somebody who keeps all of the receipts, keeps track of all of the expenses in accordance with approved budget. That's somebody who will check with the funder, with us, if there are any questions about budget or about expenses, and somebody who needs to have a bank account, whether your project's separate bank account, or it could be a bank account of a treasurer, just making sure that that person is trustworthy, organized, and is able to keep track of funds so they're not mixing up with personal funds, okay? So again, if opening a separate bank account not available for your team, in some cases could be allowed to use an existing bank account of one of the members, just as long as all of the funds are organized, receipts are kept, and monthly financial reports are submitted, okay? So that's overall the responsibilities of these three team members. Next portion of your YSEALI Seeds application is project abstract, okay? I very often stress and highlight that the project abstract is one of the very most important pieces of your application. Why? Because it shows a very concise, clean, and clear version of your overall project idea. So if you are not able to communicate in about 100 words, what is the significance of your project and why and what you're trying to achieve very clearly, it's like an elevator pitch, right? So you only have a few seconds on the elevator. You gotta get that idea out there and be understood right away. So that's what we're trying to do with this abstract. Later on, you will be able to provide all additional details of that project idea, describe it, add some pieces to that. The purpose of the project abstract is to be a very short version of your proposal. When somebody can glance at it, they can understand what your project is all about and why it is a unique idea. So how do you go about it, right? So I want you to think about your project idea, limit yourself to 100 words, and write very strategic sentences answering these three questions. Number one, you can use 1 or 2 sentences to describe your answer to a question, what your project is about and why, okay? Number 2, just 1 sentence, how are you going to make it happen, whether it's some activities or it's some events or some other things that you're going to do. And final sentence, what is the anticipated result? Are you going to impact 100 people, one community, 3 countries, or you want to compare the growth of certain knowledge, or I don't know what it is, right? But just use 4 sentences or less. Try to limit to 100 words. If it's a little bit more, if it's 120, that's fine. We are not going to count each word. The idea is that this project abstract is short, concise, and grabs the attention. It's an attention getter, okay? And it's an elevator pitch, so treat it as such, okay? Now, the next portion of your application is the overall project description. Now, project description is the full version of your proposal, right? So I generally, again, it's up to you how you want to structure it. I like structuring proposals, papers in a very logical way, just because as human beings, as our brains processing information step by step typically, so we do need to have some structure to understand the information better. So I like to structure it like you see on the screen right now, and I will explain a little more here. So let's imagine that your overall proposal is 1,000 words, okay? So I generally briefly first divide that into introduction, then the body of statement, meaning the major part, and then the conclusion, okay? Sometimes I read some proposals that don't have any beginning, so they kind of start from something and I don't even know, like, how did you get to this before explaining the first thing? Sometimes there is no conclusion. Sometimes there are proposals when there is only introduction and there is nothing else. They spend the entire proposal explaining the history of Vietnam instead of explaining then one sentence about their project idea, okay? So there has to be a balance is what I'm saying. There has to be a balance in these 3. So it has to be a logical step-by-step process. Let's focus and zoom in on the introduction. So your introduction is short. Typically it's 1 or 2 paragraphs. And this is where you briefly outline the project, right? So it's very similar to your project abstract, if you will. You can even use similar language there. So this is where you say, who you are, what this idea is for, what's going to be accomplished within that specific idea, meaning some activities or events, and then what is the anticipated result and why you are doing this project, right? I would also invite you to not use any abbreviations, use full words, full terms, and explain some local realities. For example, if there is a small local organization that you want to partner with, and not many people outside of your community would know the significance of that organization, you might need to explain it. So anybody who can read your application will understand and connect the dots. They would be like, oh, they are partnering with this organization and the significance. It's the very one and first organization in this community who does indigenous community education project or something like that, right? So it does need to make sense. So when you look at your overall proposal, try to look at it through the eyes of somebody who's going to be reading it outside of your team, right? Does it still make sense? Does my message come across? Would somebody reading this proposal in New York or Washington, D.C. understand the significance of all of the things we are proposing here, okay? So try to evaluate it through that lens. Does it make sense somebody outside my team? So introduction, again, 1 or 2 paragraphs, brief outline of the project. Then we go to the body of your statement. That's the largest part of your proposal. I typically divide it into 3 paragraphs. And logically, I do the following. In the first paragraph of that body of the statement, I would usually say the background of the issue I care about and why your project is important to address that issue. See, you need to connect. It cannot be just a project for the sake of project. The project needs to address a specific issue. So that issue could be tied to one of the 4 YSEALI themes, right? This is where you connect your why. In the second paragraph, I would focus on a proposed solution and the plan that you have under your project. right? So you could, for example, include your timeline if you'd like, although it's not required. Or you can say, these are the ways we are going to address this issue we care about, right? So this is where you basically take the reader step further. You carry them through your story logically, right? So look at it as reading a book, right? When you read a book, usually there is some kind of beginning, there is some kind of middle part, and then the end of it, right? So your proposal has the same logic in it. So your reader needs to be led through, like as if you are grabbing their hand and you carry them through your proposal, so they logically understand, the flow of your project and the flow of your thought here. Okay, so the third paragraph is typically your measurable outcome and impact, right? So what it is that you anticipate will happen as a result of your proposed solution and plan. How your proposed plan and solution going to address that issue you were talking about in your first paragraph of the body of the statement, right? So you could be ambitious, you could be realistic, or you could be somewhere in between, okay? So I would recommend for you to aim high, but at the same time, understand and assess your realities here, right? So think about, we are going to, in 9 months, increase or reach 5 communities with 1,000 people who will receive knowledge through our project or something like that. I'm making it up, but as an idea, it has to have a measurable information that will inform you as a project that you did a successful work, and also tell us how you are going to measure, where are you going to, your goal is going to be as you work on your project, right? Sometimes it's a mistake to not have a goal as you start a project, right? If you don't have a goal, you don't know where you're going to. You don't know how to adjust your scope or adjust your interventions, your activities to get to that goal, right? So although goals could be also adjusted a little bit depending on the realities, life happens, but it has to be some sort of goal that informs all of the project members, all of the volunteers, how you're going to together work to get there, okay? So keep that in mind. Now, once you're done with the body of your statement, the final part is your final paragraph, it's the conclusion. That's when you bring everybody or everything that you've been talking about, and probably everybody, you bring it to the end. You tie together the introduction and the body of your statement. That's when you say, okay, because of this issue, we are going to do this, and this is how it's going to impact, our community. And this is what we see as a future direction for us. And we anticipate, to build up on this specific, success to potentially replicate this project in other communities or in other countries or something like that, right? So give us a little bit of a taste for how the future is going to look like if you are successful. Okay, so this is where you can showcase your sustainability or your scalability a little bit, although you can also add it into other paragraphs as well. Okay, I hope that makes sense, everyone, and thank you for all of the questions that are coming in. I will definitely grab them in a moment, and my slides are almost over. So let's touch on the budget though. So all of you have seen the budget template that is available to you through the application itself. You could easily download this template and you could use it to submit your budget for your project proposal, okay? Although it is not obligatory, you can use your own template if you want to, just as long as you follow the instructions that we have currently. You see on the slide with a yellow arrow showing it, and I will also read it out loud. Just as long as you follow instructions, you can use your own template. Now, the instructions are, there are certain things that you cannot spend your YSEALI Seeds money on. And this is something very strict, and this is something that we look for. Very often I review applications and I see an amazing project, but then half of their project is allocated to something that we cannot allow this funding to be allocated to, and therefore this project is not selected. So do not do this to yourself. If you have a great project, make sure to read instructions and do yourself a service. We want to select you, but we also want you to be realistic in your budget and abide the rules. So some of the rules is you are not allowed to put international airfare or travel from the US to your country in Southeast Asia and back. Another thing that is not allowed is sustained staff salaries, office space, a monthly office space, or overhead expenses. So that means that you cannot be paying monthly salary to your team or to your staff to run this project. This project is on a voluntary basis. At the same time, if there is a small honorarium or a trainer fee that needs to be paid one time, that is allowed. You just need to explain that we are hiring the specific trainer with this set of skills, therefore they are charging the market price for that trainer services is $100. So we are going to pay them $100 to deliver their workshop, for example, okay? But it cannot be, months to months, this trainer is going to receive, $200 every month. This will look like a salary, and unfortunately, it is not allowed. I would say this is a number one mistake that I see in budgets submitted for YSEALI Seeds grant competition. Number one is people put salaries, and unfortunately, we cannot support that. Okay, so it is not allowed under this grant initiative. If you have any specific questions or you are not sure, please feel free to send us a question to our email. I will show at the end. If you just want to verify, is that allowed? Is that not allowed, right? But typically there are 6 points here in this template where we say what is not allowed. Okay, so next one is large items of durable equipment. So for example, if you want to buy an agricultural drone for $2,000, so that's considered a large durable equipment, and that might not be allowed. At the same time, we say that small equipment pieces that are not taking a large portion of your budget might be allowed on case-by-case basis. As an example of that could be somebody needed to buy a very small cheap camera to run their projects and have their participants record certain video clips, and that was essential for their project. They explained it well, and they explained the plan how this camera is going to be utilized in the community in the future. So, the community is benefiting from that. Nobody is gaining financial gain from it. Okay, next, excessive representational meals or entertainment is not allowed under this grant. For example, you cannot spend, 40% of your budget on having a nice party at a restaurant, right? I know that you're not going to do it, but it should not be a part of your budget. Although you can have a team meeting or team retreat of sorts that is essential for your project, for having the team get together and plan something. So those things could be allowed, but it should not be outside of the, should not be a large amount, and it should not look like a large, entertainment piece. Next thing is academic research. Unfortunately, academic research is not for this specific program. You may apply for other fantastic programs that US government offers in various locations. This one is not the one for you. So you cannot spend your money on academic research. You can spend funds sometimes on like surveying the community, right? So some projects have that as an important piece where they need to go into the community and do a quick survey. To understand, how to proceed with your activities, right? This is something that could be allowed because it's part of your activities, but it's not, to write and publish a PhD research of sorts. Another thing that is not allowed is partisan political activity, meaning that it's a political activity that is supporting one specific political entity, okay? So that's something that is not allowed. If your project is just focusing on civic engagement and supporting, let's say, voter rights or sort of local government awareness or like political awareness, that's a different story, but it cannot be activities focusing and supporting one specific political agenda, okay? So again, want to highlight, please read instructions carefully. At the same time, want to say it's very helpful if you put your amounts in US dollars, because at the end of the day, your award is going to be in the US dollar amount, although you will receive it in your local currency most likely, but it's very helpful for us to review your budgets in the US amounts. Again, this is because also some currencies are not stable. So what you put right now in your local currency might be very, very different 5 months from now, or 3 months from now. So we want to keep it as accurate as possible, and typically keeping in US dollars, in our experience, is more beneficial for most currencies, okay? So again, just make sure that these US dollar, you can have an additional column or additional, like a column to add where you can keep, your local currency and then the US dollar currency as well. And you can use a website called Oanda, which is OANDA.com, where you can check currency rate converter. So you can convert local currency into the US dollars and vice versa. You can use other virtual online converters as well. So people very often ask me about cost share as well. You will see on the top part of that budget template that it says total cost share, right? So cost share is something that, let's say you have an established organization, or you know that you are receiving additional funding from additional donors or funders, right? So that's your additional cost share funding that you can contribute to make this project a success. Very often I see a great success when cost share funding is covering salaries, for example, because it is not allowed under YSEALI Seeds grant. It can be covered from other sources, whether your own organization or other funders, where we don't require you to report on. Other organizations might require you, but not us. So that's a great way. Same thing with, let's say, durable equipment. If you need to buy some equipment, you can put it in the YSEALI Seeds budget, but you can charge it to your cost share. So cost share is usually very beneficial. It's not mandatory for everyone to have some cost share funding, but if you know that you have some, it actually is helpful for you to put it in there, so we know that you have additional investors who trust in you, or you have additional cushion, as we say, so additional funding that you can rely on to allocate some of your funds to. So that's helpful to have. If you don't have it, that's okay as well. Another mistake I very often see is where you have item description column, then you have unit cost, number of units, and then total. Sometimes people don't explain what number of units they mean, because it's very different. If you put unit cost, let's say $100, and let's say your supply is, or not supply, but necessarily like a travel would be a flight from, I don't know, Vietnam to Indonesia, and then unit cost would be 200, and then number of units would be 3. And then I'm not sure, is that 3 flights? Is that 3 people? Is that 3 hours? Is that 3 tickets? What it is exactly? This example might be more self-explanatory. Typically, I understand that it's like 3 flights, right? But at the same time, we need to understand what you mean by number of units. Is that hours? Is it people? Is it items? What it is that you mean. It's really helpful then to interpret, so there are no assumptions anywhere, okay? At the same time, people also ask, can we use our own budget template? Yes, you can. You can use your own. Can we use other budget categories? Yes, you can. We just put this template as a helpful beginning for you, right? So we have supplies, travel, personnel, and other as categories. Those are the basic categories that we typically see. But if you have some additional category, please feel free to add it. It's fine. That budget should be helpful for you and your project as much as it should be informative for us to understand what it is that you're trying to do. Okay. The final piece of your application is optional. Optional is additional documents. It's up to 5 pages. Please don't make it more. I usually say focus on quality, not quantity. So you can include either slides or charts or photos or any additional background information that help support your case. Why I say no more than 5 pages? Well, imagine that you are reviewing 77th application that day, right? So obviously we are all humans, and when we are reviewing application, we want to do our best to read everything we can to make the best judgment about your project, right? So if there are like 70 pages more to your addition to your core application, it only makes a person more tired trying to get the most important relevant information out of your additional 70 pages, right? So don't do this to yourself, and don't do this to a person reviewing. Your job is to make sure that you put the most relevant, concise information out there, so it's easier for a reviewer to see why you need to be selected, right? So they don't need to look through 70 pages to get that answer. They need to be able to see it right away. So your job is to make sure that you communicate clearly your idea. Okay. All right. All right, everyone, it's almost, we are at 1 hour. I will hang around to answer your questions. If your questions does not get to be answered today, make sure to send it to our email address you see on the screen. It's YSEALI@culturalvistas.org. Okay. So, and again, Jill, if you'd like to put that email address in the chat as well, just to make sure. And I know that Jill has been answering questions for you all. Thank you for that. Let's see, let me tackle a few. Please don't forget to upvote some of your questions so we don't have repeats, but we have the questions that are most important for everyone. Okay, the question is, the project time is between March and December. My question, is it necessary to be 10 months project, or is it possible if the project can be done, for example, 3 months project, any of between those months? Yes, your project could be shorter. It could be definitely, 3 or 4 months, or you could use a few months to prepare your project, to communicate to your stakeholders, audiences, get the promotion going, social media campaign, all of that, then get your event done in the span of 1 or so months, then get the post-event activities, gathering, survey if you need to evaluate how it went, document any photos or anything at all, and wrap it up successfully. So that's totally fine. It can be shorter. At the same time, we want to see what's the sustainability part of that. Are you going to then figure out the way to run it annually, or are you going to do it again, or are you going to replicate it some other way? Just make sure to mention that. Again, it's not to say that your project is not going to be selected because it's 3 months, not 9 months. It's just very helpful for you to be able to show that this is not necessarily just a one-time thing, but you have some kind of plan behind it. You plan to create a hotline. Can the budget cover the subscription fee paid to the network provider, potentially a year contract? That's a great question. So historically, right now with COVID impact and most of the projects being virtual, it does create additional need for good internet connection and let's say, as an example, good connectivity. And so it's been allowed for projects to use some funds to cover the monthly internet fee for their participants if they need to participate in their workshops or activities monthly. Again, it just needs to be not the half of your budget overall. It just needs to be a reasonable amount that is not the entirety of your project, is just paying that 1 year subscription. Okay, so I would say that it's most likely will be allowed, but we also need to see what else is in your budget, what your proposal look like overall. But please go ahead and submit your proposal. We would love to see it. Is there a resource we can see referred to regarding the YSEALI themes of education, civic engagement, etc., so we can better understand what YSEALI considered to be falling under these issues? This is a great question. I would recommend for you to check the YSEALI website, read the stories from YSEALI alumni. You can also check our website as well and read through the YSEALI Seeds projects that we've had in the past. So by looking at the types of projects that have been supported and selected in the previous years, you could get a more of a holistic picture of what types of projects are going to be selected. So some of them explicitly focus on one theme, but in majority of cases they pursue more than one theme. So it's one or two themes in one, just because it only makes sense, to use, let's say, educational trainings as a vehicle to achieve, tackling certain environmental issues. So here you have environmental issues and education combined into one logical project. So I would recommend you to check out other projects and read the full social media, YSEALI social media, Young Southeast Asian Leaders Initiative social media, where lots of different events and different alumni talk about issues that they care about. This should give you an idea for what type of themes or issues YSEALI cares about the most. Okay, let's see next. I have a question. Is that number of beneficiaries, if the number of beneficiaries matter, or we can only work with small number of beneficiaries? And is that okay if the project implementation is one country of ASEAN? Yes, it's totally fine to both of your questions. So it could be a smaller number of beneficiaries or participants at first, and you can replicate it later on and use it as a pilot, right? You run the pilot successfully and then you can build it up. So it doesn't have to be thousands of people. It can be very thought through quality project focusing on specific people you want to train, for example, to do more incredible work in the future. It just needs to have some purpose additionally, right? And it could be just one country. It doesn't have to be all ASEAN plus Timor-Leste countries. So really up to you, okay? And then we have, Jill, if you don't mind clicking on that question. So it's done, it's answered. And then to be convenient for the operating project and the quality of beneficiaries, we have to hire facilitators, translators, teachers. Could we use money of YSEALI to pay for them as a grant? The amount of money is not many compared to market salary. It's just 1/3. Yes, so you could definitely allocate some funds to pay some experts that will be coming to support your project. Again, it shouldn't look like a sustained salary where you're paying them from months to months, right? But it can be some either market price, or if you have a better deal, it's even better. Sometimes you use your network, and because your project has such a good community benefit, some experts come and say, listen, I'm gonna give you a discount on my services, and that's great. You could also use that, and they benefit from adding that experience to their resume too. So great question. So by the way, I know that we are a bit over our time. So those of you who need to drop out from this call, it's totally fine. We are recording this webinar and it's going to be uploaded into Cultural Vistas YouTube channel under the 2022 YSEALI Seeds webinars playlist, okay? And you will also, everyone who is on this webinar will also receive an email from us with this recording and the slides as well. All right, so that the program should register 3 persons as leader, secretary, and treasurer. Other should have community or organization. No, you don't have to have an established organization or a community in order to participate in this Seeds for the Future grant competition. Those 3 core team members could be separate, friends, colleagues, community members who care about certain issue and want to do an impactful work together. Do you allow labor costs or honorarium in the financials? If yes, how many percentage of the grant should be allocated to labor costs? That's a great question. I think we partially answered that in the beginning. I would just say that overall should not be more than like 20% of your budget overall that you allocate to certain, payments, honorariums. But again, it really depends on your project and your specific proposal and the realities of your project. So you need to explain if you're allocating more than that. It just should not look like you're paying somebody else to do your project. Okay, so it shouldn't, you are running your project, so it shouldn't look like you are contracting out absolutely everything just to get your project going. Okay, so it needs to be reasonable within other scope of activities and funds that you allocate. Okay. Can we use the money for website hosting in the budget proposal? It is a way to publish our project results, absolutely. And that's a great way to also support sustainability of your project. If you develop your website while you have your YSEALI Seeds funds, then it's not going to cost you as much later on when you are continuing your project without these funds, okay? When you are on your own. So great question, great idea. Same thing, you can allocate for social media campaigns, like advertisements, sometimes when you need to promote your events as well. You can also allocate your funds for that. When will treasurer send bank account? They mention in the resume or after successful applying fund. Yes, after you have been selected. So no need to put it in the application anywhere. Keep your bank account to yourself. You do not need to submit it to us. In the application, we will communicate to the selected teams about the steps you need to take to present your bank account information for your YSEALI Seeds funding transfers. Will we receive feedback on our proposed ideas from YSEALI for improvements in the future? If you request it, we do practice sending some basic feedback to applications. So if you are not selected, please feel free to email us to the email address you see on your screen right now to inquire for a feedback. It might take us a little while. You got to understand that we typically have 600 plus applications. So even right now with emails, we are a little bit slow. It's just 2 of us working on that. So if you have not received your response within a few days, you may send a reminder as well. But yes, typically we will provide some feedback to you. How do we determine the appropriate theme? Because it is linked. All of these themes have to do with social entrepreneurs, even though my essay is related to the environment. It can be purely related to just environment. And so that's the theme that you click on in your proposal. If you believe that your proposal has more than one theme, you can select the appropriate ones, but it has to be thought through. Sometimes I see people clicking on all 4 themes without really thinking, does my project really belong to all 4 themes? So I would say do not spend your energy chasing as many themes as possible, rather focus on what the actual premises and the core essence of your project is and what theme would it go under. Can we put operational costs monthly, such as internet, electrical for small office, etc.? Unfortunately, no, especially to electricity. This would be considered an overhead expense. So you cannot pay monthly to support your office. With the internet, there might be a different story, just again, depending on the premise of your project. I will need to see your proposal details, and we might have to discuss this as a one-by-one cases, basically. If our project is tech-based, can we use a big portion of the grant for the website and app development? That's a good question. We will need to see what is the premise of your application and proposal overall to determine that. I would advise you against using more than half of your budget just to pay for your website, because it looks like you are basically investing in your for-profit business in the future or something like that. So it should not be that. It should not be a project to generate your just to generate profit in the future. Although I would say we did have tech-based projects that use some funds to develop like an app or develop their website to then, provide services for their communities. So it just needs to be kind of balanced. And again, to answer you fully, I would need to see your application. So feel free to submit it. We would love to take a look. So elaborating more on train the trainer point. So this is a typical term that is used to describe a situation where project, let's say, focuses on a selected group of people to train them so then they can become trainers and multiply the impact and the effect of the project in larger communities or in larger numbers of people. So although you as a project directly do not impact, so many, students, you impact these trainers so then they can impact the other students. So I hope that makes sense more or less in the brief. Where I can find out more explanation about what kind of activity included as a civic engagement, education, etc., you may check our other YSEALI Seeds projects from previous years. Read through them, especially the ones that we currently have on the website from 2021. They even have short videos. So if you don't like to read much, you can just see their short videos, or you can read their Tumblr stories on YSEALI Tumblr. Young Southeast Asian Leaders Initiative Tumblr, where you can actually read their, more details about each project, where you can learn how they use the theme of education or civic engagement in their activities. Basically, civic engagement would mean that you're focusing on supporting community to be more engaged with each other, with their community, to support basically prosperous future for all in a way. Again, this is very general. And then education is any activities that support learning and growing and educating certain beneficiaries or certain participants. All right, well, thanks all for sticking around. I see we still have 252 people. Nobody wants to hang up, I guess. So let's just hang out then. I have 23 questions to go. I'll try to tackle them all. So I appreciate you staying in late. I want to ask, the project will be done between March and December 2022. It requires about 9 months. So if we are a student university, how about our classes? Does we have to commitment letter from YSEALI? Okay, so as far as I understand your question, you're asking, okay, we are full-time students. Some people have full-time jobs, so they're moms and dads, they have families, right? How do we, implement the project for 9 months and still manage to be doing our commitments? I would say that this is the case for all YSEALI Seeds projects. Typically, everybody have something else as their primary activity, and YSEALI Seeds is an additional project that they take on and allocate whatever time they have in the day, in the week, or over the weekend to work with the team. I would say in this case, it's essential to have a team, because then you're not carrying the entire burden yourself. You divide your responsibilities, you divide your activities together, so then together you could do it more efficiently and more effectively. So you could be a successful student, or you could be a successful mom or dad, you could be a successful worker in your own, for your own employer, wherever you are working. So this is just the basic answer to you. So before you apply, you do need to anticipate that it's going to be taking some time for you for 9 months. It's going to take some major focus. Although it is a great opportunity to showcase in your resume at the end that you have had such an incredible experience running a project, being responsible for that much money and getting it to the end. So it is a great professional development opportunity if you are still a student, and it also could be a great opportunity to show for any future funding that you will be applying that you have been successful in this one. Okay, so this is like as much as I can advise you, knowing that how much life everybody have in addition to the project. Okay, so let's see, what else do we have here? What can be defined as having a political agenda? Given the current political landscape and the themes of YSEALI Seeds, the project might be either in whole or in part considered political. How do we navigate this? Okay, great question. So I would say you still submit your proposal, because typically, your proposal goes through multiple reviews by multiple people, including some local embassies as well. So typically it's not just one person that determines, to what degree your project is has like a partisan political activity or not, right? So still submit, but keep in mind that if the project is focused on educating people about political activity or focused on supporting people in their rights to vote, or supporting people's civic engagement in their communities, or improvement or support to local government in any way. So those could be fine, although they are could be looked at as has some kind of political theme in it, although it's mostly focused on being objective to not support one specific political agenda, right? For example, if you have several political parties in your country and your whole project is to support and promote one political party over everybody else, that would be not allowed. But other themes and other ways and other activities could be allowed, just as long as it does not prefer one entity over another. So please submit your application. I would love to see it. Another question, can we use funds for application for intellectual property registration or patent or trademark or for project solution? Short answer is yes. So again, I would just need to see the details. Sorry, this is my answer all the time here, but I just want to be very careful in answering you, so I don't just say no to you, or I don't just say yes and that goes. Typically, it is case-by-case situation. We had situations in the past when the project would create beautiful, like songs for children books and things like that, and then they would register their intellectual property because it's your product, it belongs to you as a project. So typically, yes, that's my short answer, but obviously if you are selected, we will guide you through that as well. Can we include both 3 main members and external team in the resume as long as less than 6 pages of resume? Yes, you can. If you believe that this would really benefit your project to add those additional team members, you could do that, although I would focus on 3 personally, just so again, less is more, I say, right? So focus on quality, not quantity. Sometimes it's important to add additional members to show that they have expertise that your core 3 team members do not have. So in that case, it's more beneficial for you to submit their resumes than not. Okay, next we have, is it possible to change one of the core member, secretary and treasurer, once our project were picked because of certain force majeure or personal reason? Yes, it happened before. We understand life happens and sometimes team members might be changed. You just need to have a good communication in your team and good communication with us to let us know that those changes have happened and you will need to replace that team member, just so you can share responsibilities and burden overall. Okay. Are we allowed to allocate advertising budget for promotional campaign for our project events and related activities? Yes, you can. Can we get the e-certificate at the end of the program? So all YSEALI Seeds projects who have successfully completed their projects at the end will receive certificates of completion signed by very important dignitaries. So yes, if you're asking e-certificate after this webinar, unfortunately, no, these webinars are only for your information to support you in your application process. So in the 9 months currently, we're making a project and teams. Besides of that, how about our university? Does YSEALI make us recommendation letter? So I hope I understand your question correctly. So we as YSEALI Seeds funder for you, we can definitely issue a support letter. We do it very often for our project teams, where we explain the significance of the program, your participation in the program, and the funds that you are trusted to run. And typically that letter is used when projects apply for any additional funding, or they need to get license from a local government to do their activities, or any other official purposes and capacities. Sometimes when you need to do a university partnership, you might also need to have a letter like that saying that you are not just, an excited leader showing up at the university door and saying, please, accept my great activities. Instead, you can come in with an official document kind of and say, here is the organization that backs me up. Here is this program I'm participating. Would it be possible to partner with you? Okay, so if we have already a blueprint project proposal for community outreach, how can we be able and certain enough to connect with the Young Southeast Asian Young Leaders Initiative that we can gather budget solicitation on different sponsors? If I understood your question correctly, so if you are selected for the Seeds for the Future competition with your project, there's going to be multiple points of community activities with other projects and kind of collaboration and advice. You will also be connected with your local YSEALI coordinator, or Young Southeast Asian Leaders Initiative coordinator in your own country, who also will be able to connect you with other organizations or provide ideas, suggestions for what types of potential additional entities you can work with, either to apply for funds or to join forces to run your projects. Is this related to the amount of grants to choose the project? So I'm not sure what your question is, so please make sure to just, so the question is this related to the amount of grants to choose the project? So I'm not sure what you mean. Please submit your question once again fully, just so I understand how to better answer you. Are you also giving grants for cultural exhibit? For example, paintings or social artistry, which focuses on the showcasing of tradition and cultures of indigenous youth groups. So it has to be a little bit more than that, I would say. So I would love to see your proposal. If the premise of your project is just to pay to establish an art gallery, that might not be the project for you. But let's say if some of your funds goes towards establishing some of the exhibitions, but prior to the exhibition, you are training young artists, to develop art, to preserve cultural heritage, and then you showcase it. And as a result of that, you do some kind of other activities that benefit your community. Yeah, definitely could do that. So I hope that answers your question overall. If selected, is it possible for the recipient to form a consortium? Probably. We just need to know what you mean by that and why do you need it. Typically, some project established organizations, either nonprofit or NGO, or just like a registered organization, as a result of their YSEALI Seeds participation, just so they have more established presence to be able to be eligible for additional funding or partnerships or things like that, but it's not necessary. Really up to you and depending on the realities of your project and your expectations for the project. After filling out the form for community outreach program, do we have to undergo a screening process for us to execute the community outreach program? Not sure I understand, but so if you're working with your community and you have some plan in mind and you did some kind of survey and you're doing everything that is not against your local government regulations, you're good to go. We are not going to double check. You just will be submitting reports to us and communicating to us what you're discovering in your work and how you're supporting the community. But again, we don't want anybody to break any rules and get in trouble with your local authorities. Everything needs to be sort of discussed and approved prior if it requires to be. After we successfully pass the administration selection, is there any interview or presentation process? No, although if you are selected, we might, or before you're selected, we might reach out to clarify certain points with you. So please make sure to check your emails regularly between, December and February, just to make sure that, you answer the questions that might be coming, but no additional interview is required. About the supporting documentation, what information should you mention in it? So as I said, it could be anything additional that you believe can help your project stand out from all other proposals. For example, it could be a photo or a chart. Maybe you've done a previous survey where you gathered some data to show the issue or in the level of the issue that is happening in the community. Or it could be previous work done and you can present some data from that. Or anything about like additional team members and what they've done before. So anything that you believe could support the selection of your project. I would like to know that the treasurer can use the international bank account. I just have my bank account that I used when I studied in Thailand. Yes, you can use your international bank account for sure. More information would be given to selected project teams on that once you're selected. Okay, I see that, Jill, you are answering that question, right? So I'll grab another one. Okay, we have three in one. If our project will run in rural area once in a month, will the YSEALI funding will cover our travel every time we go there or just one time? Yes, every time. If that's the needs of your project, your travel is covered under your project budget. Second one here, about 5 pages of supporting document. Is it okay if more than that? But for the cover and reference, yes. If it's cover and reference, yes, just don't submit, 10 pages, okay? Is public health sector is included in the YSEALI Seeds for the Future theme? Am I right if it classified as civic engagement? It could also be under education, depending on what kind of activities you're proposing under public health sort of topic. It could also be under civic engagement, depending on what kind of activities you're doing. If you're training somebody about, you're training the community about, let's say, how to, about hygiene. We did have a project from Indonesia that focused on like sanitation principles and educating community about like hygiene, basically WASH initiative. So if that's the case, this could be either education or civic engagement. Okay, so they keep coming, everyone. I will try to grab a couple and we will stop at the 30 minutes just so everybody could finish their day. So include my question before, can we propose our organization work program for this YSEALI program? It's realistic because we do early. So I'm not sure I understand your question that was just submitted. Could you please rephrase that so I'm better able to help you? Okay, so I'm not sure. What will happen if this item in the budget is not refundable? Can we describe to other section later after we accepted by YSEALI? So basically you're asking if you purchase something and it's non-refundable and you need to return it. So I'm not sure I fully understand what you mean. Typically, when you purchase certain things, you purchase them for the reason of using it for your project. If you're referring to travel, for example, sometimes travel could be non-refundable, right? So in that case, you just need to present the explanation of what happened and that you did everything you could to return the funds, and it just happened that they were not returned back to you or something like that. But this is, I would say right now, worry about your proposal and your application. All of those later things within the implementation of your project and actually usage of your funds comes after you're selected, okay? So right now, focus on building that strong budget and provide explanation as much as you can. Can we include in the budget the Zoom subscription if people do online workshops? Yes, absolutely. Will you accept digital receipts, screenshots of Facebook marketing and other digital expenses? Yes, for sure. At the same time, also, we understand that in some cases, there are only handwritten receipts that could be obtained, especially when it comes to local transportation. Not local transportation. Let's say if you are ordering catering and there is a community family that provides catering, but they're not an official business of sorts or something like that, you can have a handwritten receipt as well. And this is something that we will go over once you are selected too. So I'm kind of going over myself. Yes, digital, receipts are allowed. Screenshots of receipts are allowed. If you, let's say, use public transport and you're not able to get like a little ticket to document it, you can even just keep track of it if it's a small amount, like $1 or less. Hello, if the team members are the trainers, can they charge for training fee? Great question. It happened in the past. So technically, yes. So if your team members, let's say you're organizing a workshop and you're inviting professionals in a certain field to present for that workshop or run that training activity, but you happen to have one or two or all three of the core team members who are also experts in that same field. So instead of hiring additional external trainers, your team could serve as the trainers, and so they are qualified to receive the same fee as your hired external trainer would get. But it just needs to be kind of like a one-time payment as an honorarium for specific services delivered. It should not be a sustained salary. Great question. Okay, is that able to spend a small amount of money on labor costs? If yes, how many percentage is minimum? I think we've had this question, similar questions. So just make sure that it's not more than 20% of your budget that you allocate for, paying trainer fees or paying honorariums or stipends or what have you for various people that you invite to work on your project. So it does not look like you're paying somebody else to run your whole project, okay? At the same time, like I said, it's a case-by-case situation. In some cases, it could be a little bit more than 20% or a little less than 20% of your overall budget total. We will definitely try to get the best idea. And if we need to clarify with you before you are selected, we will reach out to you. I can't believe, but this was, I guess, the last question in here. So thank you very much, everyone, for sticking around for so long and for asking all of these incredible, important questions. I will stop sharing the screen for now so we can just, Jill and I can personally say thank you for joining today. We will be looking forward to see you next week. So you could chat with our incredible YSEALI Seeds grantees. So thank you, everyone. Have a lovely evening or morning, wherever you are, and we will see you back next week. Bye, everyone.